Good evening to all of you, and thanks everyone for joining Dot on Time. I think time is very precious, and I'm going to start the presentation of the webinar by Marx. And it is my and ProThoughts pleasure to have Marx to, to present his talk on this platform and for you all amazing audience. So thank you so much, Mark, for being there with us, guiding us and talking today on one of the buzzing topics of the year, if I may say, disciplined agile. And as you all know, I think there is no introduction needed for Marx. Okay, I will make a single line introduction. He is the creator, along with Scott Ambler, of disciplined agile, and that is more than enough as an introduction. So, without I am very keen and excited to have Mark, and very keen to listen to his talk. I welcome Mark to talk on work smarter, lean, optimize, and accelerate. Over to you, Mark. All yours.
Thank you, Ashish, and thank you all for coming, and thank you for having me. I hope everyone is being healthy and safe and blessed in these challenging times. So today I'm going to give you an overview of Disciplined Agile and how you can use it to both be more effective in your work and, as importantly, improve your own standing, lifestyle, compensation, job opportunities with what you can learn from the DA toolkit. And I truly believe that Disciplined Agile has been sort of the best kept secret. Scott and I work. I'm speaking to you from Alberta, Canada, Calgary. This is the city, and Scott is in the eastern part of Canada, about a 4-hour flight away east of me, in Toronto. And together we wrote 4 books on Disciplined Agile and spent half of our time, if not more, actually doing this, right? As consultants and trainers. And the other half of our time was writing books and blogs and building a certification program, running what was the Disciplined Agile Consortium. As such, very, very busy and very small company, didn't have the marketing dollars to really spread the word around the world about this comprehensive body of knowledge that is in the DA toolkit. However, we still did that. I mean, our primary marketing mechanism was speaking at conferences. And I was saying to Ashish just before we got started that I think I've been to India 4 or 5 times. Love your country, and can't wait to get back on an airplane and come back. So I hope that you'll see, people have said to me, Mark, where has this been? We've needed this for a long time. So hopefully that piques your interest when you learn about what this toolkit's all about. What you're seeing today is a refresh of the presentation I was doing last year. So this is some newer content if you've seen me speak before. And the theme of it here is learn, optimize, and accelerate. So let's jump in. Now, PMI is, why does PMI exist? PMI exists for its members to, as I said in the opening remarks, provide opportunities for its members. And traditionally, it's been on the traditional project management side through its certifications, such as the Project Management Professional, or PMP. And PMI has done a very good job over its 50-year history, creating a community, local chapters where you can get together with your peers, learn from each other, attend learning events, and perhaps most importantly, be recognized as a project management professional, as somebody that has worked very hard for your designation and really understands how to manage projects. And that is well understood around the world. And as such, PMPs get better job opportunities. They get better paid. And there's data behind this. This is fact. So with the acquisition of our Disciplined Agile into PMI, we bring the most comprehensive body of knowledge in Agile in existence into PMI. And we aspire to do the very same thing that PMI has done, is to establish ourselves as the certification for people who really want to know the breadth of Agile techniques, not just one method, not just Scrum, not just Safe, not just Less or Kanban or whatever the flavor is, but learn a bit about everything and learn how to choose your way of working. And that truly makes you a valuable professional and much more, what we believe, much more credibility than somebody that just has 1 2 day Agile certification. So that's the mission of PMI, is to create those opportunities for you, so that you can be properly compensated for your knowledge and experience. So, this I did this talk at a panel, or just recently, where we were reflecting on the fact that the Agile Manifesto is now 20 years old. And a lot of executives are saying it's been 20 years and we've spent lots of money on training and we tried different flavors of Agile. Are we there yet? Are we done? Are we Agile? And the unfortunate answer is, in many cases, no. The people are still debating about the merits of Agile. Executives are still wondering why they're not getting the benefits they were promised. So why is that? And I can tell you, for me, it's very clear, is that we're taking an undisciplined approach to implementing Agile, and we're not investing enough in learning about the different alternatives that are available to us. We pick a framework, we pick a method, and figure that's what we need. We implement it, and we consider ourselves Agile. Not the case. That's not the recipe for success. I'll tell you more about that as we go. And there's some data behind how we have been struggling with this. And Don Reifer surveyed 1,500 Agile teams. So it's a big survey, 150 organizations. And his results were actually, to be honest with you, a bit underwhelming. An Agile method yielded a productivity improvement of 7 to 12%, which is not great. And by the way, this data conflicts with the title of a bestseller book called, double the productivity in half the time, which really isn't doing us any favors, because executives see that and they expect a team half the size to get twice the work done. It's really not realistic. That can happen if you're in a really, really bad situation. You can get fourfold productivity improvements, but that is going from a really bad situation to a really good. So those are kind of outlier data points. This is more fact. And in Agile scaling frameworks, an improvement of 3 to 5%. So, if you look at SAFe and other scaling frameworks, an improvement for when an executive sees an improvement of 3 to 5%, they ask themselves, why did we spend all this money? This is not the kind of ROI I expected for my investment in this framework and training. We can do better, is the message here. So, why 20 years on are we still struggling and debating? Well, I'll tell you why. You may have seen this quote before. It's a popular quote. For every complex problem, there is an answer that is clear, simple, and wrong. Okay, so this is difficult stuff, and looking for the easy answer typically won't work. So the organizations have been looking for simple solutions. They've been buying a framework and declaring themselves a method shop of some sort. And this is something that really concerns me. We shouldn't be calling ourselves a Scrum shop or a SAFe shop or a less shop or a Kanban shop or a hybrid shop. You know why? Because every organization is doing more than one thing. No organization is one particular kind of shop. That is reality for any organization of any size. I was saying to Ashish that I've been out to Pune a couple of times to help Barclays and HSBC in the development teams. And I've worked with Barclays for a number of years, and they have, by their count, over 1,200 teams using DA. Now, those teams might not call themselves disciplined Agile teams. They might call themselves a SAFe team or a Scrum team or a less team or Kanban team. But underneath the covers of what they're doing on a daily basis, they're using techniques from the DA toolkit. But they don't call themselves a DA team, because the DA, what I'm going to show you is it's like a pantry of ingredients. The recipe for those ingredients you might be using might be a SAFe recipe, it might be a Scrum recipe, but neither of those, SAFe or Scrum, has all the ingredients you need to be successful. So that's where you start to go outside the framework offers and supplement your approach with other techniques like personas, which is not part of SAFe. But personas can make you be more effective with SAFe or more effective with Scrum. So this is the idea. I'm trying to explain to you the difference between ingredients and recipes. You can think of frameworks and methods of recipes. But the key point here is that every organization that is successful will adapt and not everybody doing safe or not everybody doing Scrum. They will pick the recipe for the team or teams in the part of the company in their situation that makes sense for them. And the Barclays is a good example. I told you I've been into Pune, and I think they were using a lot of Scrum. I've been to Singapore, and they were doing some less over there. So that's good, and that's the way it should be. You should allow the teams to pick the way of working that makes sense for them. So being disciplined means we need these three things. We need to invest in learning. I believe this is what we've lost, is that you take traditional project management and you're expected to, for the PMP, for an example, to understand a significant body of knowledge, have thousands of hours of real world experience, and pass a challenging exam. That investment in learning makes it credible. And if you go to, I'm not picking on Scrum, but if you go to a CSM class and it's 2 days, we're talking about maybe 14 to 16 hours of training, and you pass a guaranteed to pass test with no experience requirement. It's no wonder that when organizations trust people with 14 hours of training with large investment for a critical project, it's no wonder that things go wrong. In the Scrum course, as an example, you don't learn about risk management. And risk management is equally important on agile projects as it is in traditional, but it's typically not taught in certification programs. Guess what? It's part of the DA toolkit. We teach it. So we need to invest more in learning, go beyond 2 days of training. Now, having said that, our certifications and the courses that the ProThoughts offers are 2-day courses, but you're expected to also study, if my video is on, I believe it is, the Choose Your Wow book. Right? This is a 400-page book, significant body of knowledge. So the training is 2 days, but you also need to study for a test, which gives the certification some credibility. So we need to invest in learning. Once we know our options, now we can look to optimize the overall system, which I'll go into shortly. And then as we optimize, then we're in a position to actually accelerate the delivery of value to our stakeholders. So you can't buy enterprise agility. This isn't a simple problem. We need to learn how to adapt for our situation. So yeah, I think I've talked about this already. It's time to raise the bar. And when I say you deserve better, yeah, you as a professional deserve a really good training certification program that properly prepares you for the challenges that you see. And organizations deserve better. They need to know when they bring somebody in, that person is properly trained and experienced for accepting a lead role or even a practitioner role on an agile project. So this is the difference here between PMP's approach as an example and a classic agile project where it's a much lower bar in terms of what you need to understand to become certified. Like the Scrum Guide is 13 pages as an example, the latest release. It's not a significant body of knowledge. And by the way, I'm not blaming Scrum and Ken and Jeff for creating it and keeping it small. They did that on purpose. They created a kernel of process, recognizing that they weren't experts in testing or architecture and other things. So they didn't try in Scrum to tell you how to do testing or architecture, but they created just enough of a kernel of process and said, you guys go figure out the rest of it, because you'll know whether to do estimating or testing or architecture, planning, etc. But you know what? That advantage of keeping it small and simple is a double-edged sword. It makes it very easy to learn Scrum, but we're not equipped to really do all the other things that is necessary for you to be successful. So that's the kind of challenge that we're faced with. And let me tell you more about how DA can help us meet that challenge. It is a toolkit, provides straightforward guidance that enables us to make better decisions inside our organizations about our way of working. So it's a toolkit. We used to call it a process decision framework, which just confused everybody because a lot of people don't like process and they don't like frameworks. It's more actually, and we're not, so we've gone away from saying we're not a framework. A framework kind of says do things this way, and you're kind of put in this box and do it like that, because that's what it is. That's not what we are. A better analogy is this a pantry of ingredients. with some starter recipes. So we, rather than having a typical certification program has one recipe, you have like a Scrum approach or a lean approach or a safe approach. We actually have choice. We have six different recipes, if you will, starter recipes. You don't start from scratch, and they're based on Scrum and they're based on lean, and you pick the one that makes sense for you. So we're all about choice. There's a good segue into this here. The Agile Manifesto is over 20 years old now, and it's a beautiful thing. It's got value statements and it's got 12 principles. But you know what? It's 20 years old, and 20 years ago was a different world than what we live in today. And if you look at some of the principles, you'll realize they're kind of outdated. Like, for instance, they say it's good to deliver software every couple of weeks to every couple of months. I'm sorry, but that bar is far too low these days when you have Googles and Amazons of the world deploying many times per day into production. But nobody wants to mess with the Agile Manifesto. It's kind of a sacred thing. So we actually did improve the Agile Manifesto when we had something called the DA Manifesto. But manifesto sounds kind of controversial and it's not a welcoming term, is it? So we've actually just recently reframed. You can think of this as kind of an updated manifesto to be more modernized around principles, promises, and guidelines. And we don't have time in this presentation. It would take me an hour to go through this one slide, but I'll just cherry pick a couple of things that I think are interesting. So in terms of principles, delighting customers. Like, if you do Agile properly, you should be delighting customers. And frankly, it's not that hard. So if you learn the techniques, and part of the reason we delight customers is we want our teams to be awesome, and we can teach people techniques for the teams to really meet their potential in terms of performance. And then on the principle side, some of the, this is like foundation DA. We're pragmatic. We're not purist. We believe in choice, giving you choice of different techniques. I talked about different kinds of methods, Scrum and Lean as an example. We want to optimize flow. I'll move on to the promises. One of my favorites is to create psychological safety, where we can fail and not be punished for it or judged, but we use that as a learning opportunity to get better, and embrace diversity. If you look at the Agile Manifesto, there's no diversity in the people who created it, and there's no mention of diversity in the values and the principles. And I think it's time that those things are recognized, and how diversity can actually dramatically increase our performance and our results. And then when you get in, improved predictability is also in there. And in guidelines, a couple of my favorites are create effective environments that foster joy. In my experience, the reason I'm so passionate about this is because people who do this properly are happier. And I'm not just talking about the IT teams. I'm talking about PMOs. I'm talking about architecture groups, data groups, release management. Everyone's happier if you embrace agility across the organization. And by the way, this is the new role for leaders, for managers, to be more like leaders rather than managing. And then related to this is creating culture by improving the system. Another responsibility of managers as leaders in the modern world is don't try to change the people. The people are good, but often they're stuck in a bad system. So change the system, don't change the people. Create an environment for them, as I said, that helps them to be the best that they can be. So those are principles, promises, guidelines, and they become the foundation of DA, which is reflected in the bottom row here. We sometimes call this the square onion, and again, we don't have time to go into the details, but suffice it to say that if you're going to be really agile, you have to optimize the system, the entire organization, not just IT. And this is one of the real differentiators of DA, is that we address agility across the organization. And we have the row second from the bottom, discipline DevOps. That is where the real meat, if you will, of DA is. That our books, our first books have been written around disciplined agile delivery on the second row from the bottom, far left. And disciplined agile delivery, or DAD, talks about how do we create these high performance teams with the practices from the toolkit. But it's not enough to be able to build a feature every day if we can only deploy it once a quarter or once a month. So that's where we need to be agile in security and data and release management, etc. That's really what enterprise DevOps is all about. and we provide guidance in those different areas to help you truly be agile. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the other areas a little bit later on in the presentation when I talk about optimizing and accelerating. So we'll move on. So the key point in all this is we need to invest in learning. We need to supercharge our skills. And I've talked enough about this, and I'm going to pick up the pace a little bit. But understand that this is the Choose Your Wow book. What the book is the second edition of the first book that we ever wrote. First book we wrote was called Disciplined Agile Delivery. And when we rewrote it and added content and such, rather than calling it Disciplined Agile Delivery Second Edition, we called it Choose Your Wow, because that's really what it's all about. It's about choosing your way of working. And side by side, this compared to the Scrum Guide, you can see that there's certainly a lot more content in this body of knowledge. And I'm going to show you some examples of the content. So you and your teams have options. You have lots of them. This is the market example of ingredients. Do you know what your options are? Do you know which ones work in different situations? And this is the reason that people have been struggling with Agile, is they don't even know what the ingredients are. They've only been taught, about Scrum and its basic ceremonies or events. They don't know what is Lean and how can Lean be an alternative, or how can Lean supplement Scrum as an example. We just, don't invest enough in learning. Like you see in the top left here, Saffron. People may not have even heard of that, and where it might be useful. So this is the analogy in IT. There's, and I'm going to show you here that on the right-hand side, you can see where you go to a normal Agile course, you learn about one requirements technique. It's called user stories. In DA, we talk about 53 different requirements modeling techniques because we believe choice is good and context counts. We need to pick the tools for the situation we find ourselves in. In most cases, user stories are going to be very useful, but you know what? That's their text, very sparse text. You're going to want to supplement it maybe with some pictures, some diagrams. So some of the requirements modeling techniques are pictorial, diagrammatic, and some of them are textual. How-it testing, 93 different techniques for automated and manual testing. So this is where I'm just trying to get across to you the breadth of the toolkit. It's extremely robust. In fact, there's nothing else out there like it. Scott and I read the 100 books and we consolidated the content from the different methods into one sort of repository, if you will. And on the left-hand side, basic project management stuff like risk management, release planning, isn't talked about in most certification programs. Estimating techniques. I think we've got 8 or 10 different estimating techniques that we can help you with. So it's so sometimes people say to me, "Oh, Mark, it sounds really complicated. Hundreds and hundreds of strategies. I wouldn't be able to deal with that." I want to assure you, it's not that difficult. Whatever you're currently doing, keep doing it, but improve with the techniques from the toolkit. So if you're doing Scrum, great. We're not trying to tell you to stop doing Scrum because Scrum is part of DA. By definition, Scrum is composed of practices, and those practices are in the toolkit. So start where you are. And if you're starting from scratch, then we give you like a Scrum lifecycle. And it's actually called Agile because it's more than Scrum. So we have Agile life cycles, we have Lean life cycles, we have an exploratory life cycle based on the Lean startup, and we have a program life cycle based upon SAFe. So it's not hard to get started. If you don't have anything, we teach you how to do Scrum. If you're doing Scrum already, then we teach you how to get better and maybe layer in some Lean or move to Lean if that makes sense for you, or use both. So think of the toolkit as a pantry of ingredients, and these life cycles, think of them as starter recipes. Now, how do you organize the content? I'm going to show you some examples of content here. We have these goals because on every project, you're going to have these goals. You're going to need a team. You're going to need to explore the scope. You're going to need to want to plan the release, perhaps do some estimating. There's debates out there about whether or not you do estimating. You know what? We're agnostic. You need to understand that DA is agnostic. And if estimating doesn't make sense for you, then that's fine. And if you do want to do estimating, well, we've got 8 different techniques to show you how to do estimating. So behind each of these goals, this is where you will find the content. And I'm going to show you a few examples. So every project or product, you're going to need to understand the scope, of course. And how do you depict the scope? How do you, get the scope from your stakeholders? Well, we have an explore scope goal diagram. And the goal diagram has what we call decision points. There are things you want, the ways of organizing essentially the strategies. So if I look at one here, if I want to explore the usage of a project that I'm doing, well, you'll see in this list use case or user stories. The ones that are bold and italicized means if you want to do one from this group of options, then these are good ones to start with. They're like default choices. You wouldn't do all the bolded ones. Let me be clear. You would cherry pick the ones that help you explore the scope. So some are organized by exploring usage, exploring the domain and terminology, exploring the process, and you pick the ones that make sense for you. Now, for every goal diagram, we have content. We have tables of content that defines what the technique is of all the options and where it might be useful. And this is one of the things that really sets DA apart. It's not just a Wikipedia of agile practices, it's actually contextual. So it helps you decide which choices make sense in different situations. So hopefully you can understand how this helps you to choose your way of working. You don't have to sort of fail fast and figure out things yourself over time and struggle to get things right. You can rely on similar situations where these techniques have worked, and then that will help you make better choices to choose your way of working. So, and personas, I often talk about personas as being a really good technique, but you know what? A lot of people have never even heard of them. And where might you use personas? They help us to build empathy with our users. And if we have empathy with our users, we build better user experiences because we understand them as people and how they work, so we can design a better solution for them. It's a great technique. I really recommend it. A lot of people never even heard it. This goes back to the investment in learning and understanding what options are available to us, going beyond that basic 2-day certification course. So I'm going to show you, there's actually an online version of this content. Now, if you're a PMI member, you get to download the PDF of the Choose Your Wow book for free. It's included in your PMI membership. Otherwise, you can buy it from the PMI bookstore or Amazon. But we also have an online version of it. So I'm going to give you a quick demo of that. I need to log on to PMI, obviously, since it's a member benefit. It's going here. And up it comes. So what you see on the left-hand side is these goals diagrams that I talked about. And what you see here is secure funding as an example. And then if I click on any of the decision points, the strategies on the right-hand side come up in a table below. So you can see here, this is essentially what you find in the book. So you find the definitions of each options and the trade-offs. And one of the nice things about the online tool is that you can actually link to the resources to get more information. So for instance, I might want to learn about agile software development, CapEx, OpEx, because that's a popular topic in finance, but how do we do that in an agile way? So I could click on that and it goes out to references, and in this case, a blog written by Scott and myself on CapEx, OpEx. So you see there, so each goal diagram has the very same format. An example here of evolving your way of working, one of the things you'll need to do is to pick which life cycle do you want to use. So here you see them. This is what we were talking about: lean, agile, less, Nexus, safe. Now we don't tell you, everything about how to do safe as an example. You would want to go to a safe course from that, but we can tell you which the advantages and disadvantages of each of the different life cycles, so you can pick one that makes sense for you in your context. And by the way, one thing I didn't show or describe is that if you have an arrow beside it, it means that generally the choices at the top are better than the choices at the bottom. So this helps you also make better decisions. You aspire to, in this case, to pick life cycles towards the top. You may not start there, but you want to evolve to an approach that uses the choices at the top. That's how you maximize your agility. Okay, so that's the online tool. Go back to my presentation. And it's free to, this tool is free to PMI members. It's also available in 6 languages. So you see here Chinese and Japanese and I think Italian and French, I think is what I've got here. So that's also nice, available in different languages. So we talked about the importance in investing and learning. And I think hopefully you know that that there are courses scheduled, and I'm going to tell you more about that at the end of this presentation. So the next topic is to optimize. Once you've learned your options, now you're automatically going to be a more effective employee or consultant, scrum master, team member. And we want to now use that knowledge to optimize, because choice is good and context counts. So this is a really important message that I'm talking about these days, is that what we taught. Agile's been around for 20 years formally, that is, informally longer than that, but formally since the Agile Manifesto 20 years. And people ask me, what's the next 20 years hold? I truly believe that the days of following somebody else's method and framework are numbered. And the companies that really will excel are the companies that don't rely on the crutches of a particular method or framework. Because at best, you're following. And following doesn't always get you the best results. Leading is better. So ask yourself, are you following as an organization, or are you leading? And what I would ask you to ask yourself in your organization, not as individuals, but in your organization, what organizations do you fear? And you got this thing called like apex level competitors, the highest level competitors in the food chain. Those are the people, like, who do you fear and who do you admire? And if I look at the companies on the right-hand side here, some of them you're trying to compete with, but you don't particularly fear. Others, like certain kinds of car companies, other car companies are terrified that they're going to put them out of business, and they're trying to catch up. Same thing with banks. Banks are terrified of the Googles of the world that are starting to sell insurance online without brick and mortar. So we need to understand, how do we become more competitive? And if you're if you're a bank and you're copying another bank because they use SAFE as an example, and by the way, I'm not criticizing SAFE. SAFE is good in some situations, but I can tell you it's some situations it is not good at all. So you need to think. You need to decide, is SAFE a good fit for me in this situation, or am I going to be more nimble using continuous delivery or some other approach? So this is what we need to think. If you copy somebody else's approach, that is not going to make you successful. At best, it will help you to keep up. By the way, Spotify, people talk about copying Spotify, what Spotify did. Please don't copy Spotify. What you know about Spotify is the way they used to do Agile 7 years ago. 7 years ago. That's not the way. Everything you see on YouTube and stuff, that's not current. They've moved on. So if you copy what they did, you're like 7 years behind. The beauty of Spotify is not what they do. It is the fact that they took responsibility for their own agility and developed their own way of working. And that's what we need to learn to do, is to be like Spotify, not be Spotify. Learn how to learn like they did. Become what we call a learning organization. So I've kind of beat this one to death, so I'm not going to belabor this point here. But the good news here is that starting with somebody else's methodology or framework can be a good start. Okay, but I recognize it's just the start. It's not the destination. You need to further evolve from there. And you don't have to start from scratch. Start where you are and improve, what we sometimes call improve in place. Okay, so this is what we typically see in organizations when they adopt a method or framework, is that they improve. They take a dip in productivity as they learn what the framework's all about, and then they improve as you would expect, but then they quickly level off as they exhaust the guidance of the framework or method. We need to keep going. We need to keep improving. And you can use Kaizen, continuous improvement, retrospectives, failing fast, all these techniques to learn and improve as you go, and that's okay. But you know what? If you use the techniques from DA Toolkit, which are context-based, learn from what the mistakes other people have made and apply the techniques that have been proven to work in your situation. This accelerates your learning journey. We call this guided continuous improvement. It's a better way of improving. Start where you are, do the best you can in the situation you face, and always strive to get better. So learn, optimize based on what you've learned, and then how can we take that and actually accelerate and deliver more value and delight customers? So we want to think about business agility and the nimble enterprise and optimizing the whole. If you're optimizing for your team, that's local optimization. That's not optimizing the system. And one of the reasons that agility fails in organizations is because those teams have impediments in their organization. They're getting in the way of their agility. If you think about PMOs and data groups and release management, do they help you become more agile or do they slow you down? I can tell you what it is for most organizations. We need to recognize agile teams do not deliver in isolation. They're part of a larger ecosystem, a complex adaptive system. We need to optimize the whole, not local optimization. And I'll tell you more about that. So a delivery team doesn't work in isolation. They have to work with these other teams to actually deliver value. And I want to show you some examples of impediments that you may have seen in the past. So finance says to your team, your funding runs out next month. I need you to create a business case, a project plan with estimates, and have it reviewed by the PMO before I can extend your funding for another 3 months. Does that sound agile? And the team lead says, but that means my teams will need to stop for several weeks to do this planning. They will be producing no value during this time. So the classic example of where finance is doing what they think is the best thing for the organization. But you know what? There are better ways to do what they're asking here. There are more agile ways to get this. And it's not their fault. They just haven't learned their options. They haven't learned different ways of working, so they can be agile too. Team lead says, I urgently need another developer for my team. And HR says, you will need to funding approved by finance, a requisition filled out, internally post the position for 2 weeks before you even start interviews, right? Meanwhile, the team is out without a key developer. Release management. I have 3 new features ready to ship that our customers urgently need. And release management says, these need to be prioritized and approved by a change management committee meeting. Then they can be added to our month-end release. So clearly delaying adding value or delivering value to our customers. A couple more quick ones here. Team lead, I won't read this, but data. Often data groups can slow you down because they need data changes approved. Finance. This is actually a true story of a company I helped get rid of their timesheets. So I say, filling out timesheets is costing each team member half an hour time per week. They work on many things at a time, so the data is wrong in their timesheets anyway. Can we stop this? And finance says it's important that we understand all tasks worked on and time spent so that we can properly create accounting entries for CapEx, OpEx. You know what? There's a technique where you can get rid of timesheets and give even better information to finance for their CapEx, OpEx. So I talk about, companies I've gotten them to stop doing timesheets and taught them a better way of working. So DA teaches Scrum Masters to help teams accelerate value delivery by incrementally helping functional areas to become agile themselves. This is the beautiful thing about DA. You may have heard of Flex. We have a new certification. It's actually being piloted today as we speak for our new certification coming out called the Value Stream Consultant. And this is for doing agile in scaled situations where you're doing something like SAFe. How can you speed up SAFe, speed up the delivery of value? So I don't have time to talk about this today, but we do have guidance in DA in our Value Stream Consultant certification. If you're in a situation with large customers using SAFe, we have guidance for that. A couple of case studies. I talked about Barclays, 1,200 teams using a variety of approaches like SAFe, LESS, Scrum, etc., Lean. They've been very successful. Insurance company in Canada that I worked with. And by the way, for these case studies, if you go to pmi.org/disciplined-agile, so pmi.org/disciplined-agile, that's the Discipline Agile Hub on PMI. Go to the resources menu, success stories, and you'll find 3 5-minute videos in there on how DA has interviews with CIOs of companies that have really seen dramatic benefits by implementing DA. Really encourage you. 3 minutes, 5 minutes each, 15 minutes, and a small investment of time to learn. So just wrap up here and we'll get to some questions is better skilled teams. We want to learn. Better skilled teams deliver better results, quicker, happier, lower risk. So you want to supercharge the skills of your teams. We're then prepared to optimize, evolve beyond frameworks and methods, design your agile ways of working to win, and then accelerate, deliver agile. Discipline Agile improves value streams and flow of value to customers. We want to be nimble, improve flow, deliver more value to your customers. So how do you get started? Well, practitioners, if you're a practitioner on the call, invest in supercharging your skills. You'll have better job opportunities, better compensation, better growth, and it will be a differentiator from the sea of other more trivial certifications that are out there. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about the DA Scrum Master certification in a second. And if you're in team, you should train all the team members. It's not just the Scrum Master. By the way, the DA Scrum Master certification is not just for Scrum Masters. It's for any team member. Any team member should invest in learning these strategies. You'll have better retrospectives, better process improvement. And organizations, same thing. They should train all their members in their organization. They'll be much more effective. They'll be much more competitive. So these are the certification, how we've evolved the certification program, the DA certifications into PMI. That PMI has an existing ACP certification. We're not doing anything with it. It's still there. It's still good. If you're new to the Agile journey, take the DA Scrum Master. It's a great place to start. It's like a Scrum Plus, because we don't just teach Scrum. We teach you about Lean. We teach you about at least an introductory level of what's in the toolkit to start referencing it. It really is the best in class Scrum certification out there. And then the DA Senior Scrum Master, if you want to take your Scrum game to a new level, and if you're already doing Scrum, by the way, you do not need to go to the DASM. You can go directly to the Senior Scrum Master. But you need to get that designation, you need to have 2 years of Agile experience. But if you've got 2 years of Scrum experience, that counts. Go directly to the DA Senior Scrum Master, and you'll learn a lot about leadership and how to do Scrum in non-trivial situations, complex projects, scrums of scrums, all those kinds of things. And then watch for the DA Value Stream Consultant and DA Coach certifications are going to be released. They're not out yet. They're in pilot, going to be released in the next couple of months. Okay. So to wrap up, ProThoughts is kindly hosting me today, and they are authorized instructors of these trainings. So there's a LinkedIn discussion group here. I'm sure you'll be able to get this presentation after the talk. I'm giving ProThoughts permission to distribute it, absolutely. And there's a LinkedIn group you might want to check out that ProThoughts has on Discipline Agile certification. They also have, and you know, I'll let Ashish if I don't describe this properly, but they have a knowledge check, so you can find out what do you know about DA right now, and maybe which certification is best for you to start with. And I've seen on their website they provide some really good advice to let you know whether you should take the Scrum Master or the Senior Scrum Master. And they do have a batch coming up for the Senior Scrum Master training on March 2021. And there's a link here. So that is my last slide, and I could leave it here. If you do Twitter, I'm at Mark_Lines. And for more information at PMI, go to pmi.org/discipline.